Welcome in everybody to another edition of the Real Ballz podcast. I am your host, Ryan Squires, and we are on an awesome tour today. Going to be doing all kinds of different things. Going to be visiting different pro shops and whatnot, getting out of the normal office routine. I'm here at Savage Bowling Pro Shops in Anderson, formerly known as the Bowler Shop, with the one and only Mike Riggins, 13-year veteran of writing for Bowler's Journal on the bowling ball reviews, IPSA instructor for many years, a man who really knows what he's doing and knows what he's talking about. But I first want to cover a couple of things that happened in our last show where we discussed in habits that, or annoying habits that bowlers tend to do. And the first thing I want to talk about is cracked bowling balls, like we talked about before. And I just so happen to have an example of a cracked bowling ball. So if you'll follow me, I will show you exactly what I was talking about, what happens when you put your bowling ball in the oven. And it is right here. If you see that right there is exactly what happens when you put your bowling ball in the oven. You'll see. You're saying that it had basically splintered because it had been in there for so long. Did she say how long her heat was on it?
No, at first she denied that she put it in the oven. She said that she threw the ball down the lane and it came back that way.
And I actually covered that in my last podcast. You get a lot of people, and I'm sure you do as a pro shop operator, who bring a ball in and they say it's lane damage, and yet it's actually a nice, massive split down the ball.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered at any time a lane damage that is flat out a cracked bowling ball?
No.
Yeah, so it's coming from the factory, something's happened that's caused it to crack. Whether it's the oven, whether it's leaving it outside, something has caused that expanding and contracting, correct?
Yep.
Awesome. So
something your viewers want to remember, you put your oven on warm, unless you've got one of those $10,000 chef's ovens, you cannot control the temperature. Warm is going to be 200 degrees and above. You get about 175 degrees and you start expanding the different densities at different rates, and that's what happens.
Mike, can you tell me on this two-piece of equipment over here, this is a Detox Machine.
Yep.
Made by Jayhawk, and it's specifically designed to do what exactly? To basically bake the oil out of the bowling ball? Does it soak it out? Does it clean it out? How exactly does it work?
It uses a combination of heat from the water. The water is 115 to 117 degrees, very safe range, and then the detox chemical helps amplify the heat.
Okay.
When you drop one in and fire it up, you can actually see the little molecules of oil coming out of the surface of the ball and raising to the surface of the water.
And it floats on top, correct?
Floats on top.
Interesting. Now, Detox obviously took over the Wave Machine, correct? The Wave Machine was the go-to, and then all of a sudden the Detox is just the Wave's been discontinued, but the Detox had to just be a better, more accurate way of doing things, correct?
Wave Machine I saw at trade shows didn't really impress me. Over the years I've done the Rejuvenator. I had one of Billy Hall's very first Rejuvenators.
Did you do the Reviver oven?
I had the Reviver. They were kind of labor intensive. You had to stay on them. This thing is just awesome. Does a much better job. I feel a safer temperature range at 117 degrees. The Reviver and Rejuvenator, you're somewhere around 140, 145, which is still in the safe range. But the lower heat we can do on a ball to draw the oil out of it, the better I feel from the customer standpoint.
And on a Reviver, from my experience on a Reviver, you could put it in for 2 hours, and then that 2 hours would go by, it'd still have oil all over the surface, and you'd have to put it in for another 2 hours or whatnot just to try to dry it out.
The labor part was constantly opening the lid and wiping the ball down with some kind of cleaning agent. The wiping pads on the bottom of it that the ball would rotate on, it didn't do a real good job of making contact with the ball and keeping the oil wiped off of it. I
think it's pretty clear, with the Wave Machine being discontinued already, and then the Detox still being the dominant piece of equipment, that, the Detox is really a much better piece of equipment to get the oil out. So when they get the oil out, what exactly does it do? Does it increase your ball reaction? What does it do to get that out?
Sets the surface more back to like factory. We've got the oil and some of the dirt that's migrated into the pores removed from the ball, so the ball can generate a little more consistent friction on the lane. It's kind of like taking the ball back to box.
Okay. getting it out, giving it a second chance.
This is another good income avenue. It's a hellacious jewelry cleaning machine.
So basically, you can make good revenues off of teaching. I've noticed over the years, while polish has gone down, people cleaning their bowling balls, which we've advised for years, has absolutely finally started to take off. It's like people started realizing that cleaning your bowling ball might be a good idea.
I've seen that increase tremendously in the last few years, and I've seen some people actually starting to do it the right way, which is they clean it when they're done bowling before they stick it in the bag. That way they can catch all that stuff up on the surface of the ball before it has a chance to settle into it.
Now,
once it gets in the ball, this is the only way you're going to get it out of it.
Let me ask you this. So for years as a pro shop operator, we used to have a bunch of cleaners and polishes all over the place, and they just sat. Nobody ever really paid attention to the fact that a bowling ball could wear out. But now I've noticed cleaners are selling like crazy. Polishes not so much, because it almost seems as though people don't polish their ball. They just buy a new one. Do you see that as well, where they're just buying that ball instead of necessarily doing the surface work that could potentially help them?
We do a lot of clean and polishes by hand in here. We do a lot of surface resets. We do quite a bit of resurfacing too.
Yeah, and
you
that's...
put the maintenance into it, you can extend the life of the ball tremendously.
Is that a lost art? Because I've noticed that resurfacing, although it's so important when you're plugging bowling balls, getting it smooth and everything, have you noticed the lost art of resurfacing from people, that they don't even realize that what a value they get when they get a ball plugged and it gets resurfaced and whatnot, that there's a lot of labor-intensive stuff that goes into that?
Not really, because when we do a plug job here, we're going to reset the surface. I want a good product to come out. I'm not going to plug the ball up. Clear plug, black plug. I'm going to do my best to match the color to the ball, and we're going to reset the surface so they've got a good-looking piece of equipment when they walk out.
For a full plug, what is your rate for a full plug on a ball? If you were to plug a full ball, balance hole, finger holes, thumb holes, and basically start over?
Oh, wow. We're not going to use this for price fixing, are we?
No. Just simply...
Yeah, that's just a joke.
Simply questions. Trying to
three
compare.
holes, $43.
Okay, so if...
Balance hole, $14 and up, depending on the size of the balance hole.
Now, do you charge extra for, like, interchangeables because they've got such massive holes?
There's an extra charge if there's an interchangeable thumb in it, because, yeah, we are using extra plug.
Okay, so when you do that, do you ever figure, when you cut it down and everything else, I put this in an argument before, that when you fully plug a ball and you cut it down, you get it all perfect the way that you should, the way a good pro shop operator would, and then you factor in what your drilling fee costs, what you would normally make if you drilled a blank ball. Do you ever think about my argument was, okay, if I charge $60 to drill a blank ball, and then I charge this much for plug, and this much for resurface, it all adds up to this massive amount of money, and you're never going to get it. And so I almost feel like people don't realize just how much labor goes into that and what it could really actually cost.
It's a lot more labor intensive to plug one up, and it's not, I mean, plugging's fairly profitable, but with the time you put into it, the effort you put into it, no, it's, price-wise, it's cheap.
And with bowling balls wearing out as quick as they do, you can always extend the life if you maintenance it. How often should someone come in and have that kind of work done?
Depends on how often they bowl, how many leagues a week, how much practice, the pattern they bowl on. If they're a second shift bowler and they're bowling on burn, more towards the surface than keeping the oil out of the ball. If they're a first shift bowler, they're bowling a couple times a week, they may be looking at detoxing and resetting the surface a couple times a season.
What's that saying you always say, and you used to say in Bowler's Journal all the time when it came to bowling balls?
Oh, there are no magic bowling balls. There's only magic bowlers.
And how do you get to be a magic bowler?
Practice, 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 practice. You can't buy a game.
And that seems to have gone down over time. Everyone's always seeming to looking for that magic ball. Would you agree?
Yeah, God bless them.
They try.
For the new ball.
Do you think coaching has impacted at all into these people? I mean, do you see a lot of coaching actually helping, or is it mostly pro shop operators out there trying to make sure that their customers are happy?
For the actual league bowlers, very little in the way of coaching. I'll tell you what, the junior program the last several years, those kids have got more knowledge, more game than a lot of your regular league bowlers, because the coaching has been there for them.
Do you feel that there's an ignorance of, the youth bowlers are learning, but do you feel there's an ignorance of the scratch bowlers are the scratch bowlers, the youth bowlers are the youth bowlers, but those 130 to 190 average bowlers, those people, they always seem to be ignored in the ads. They seem to be ignored in the coaching. And I always argue that if they don't get any better, they don't bowl. They want to improve, and if no one's out there to help them improve, do you ever see that they just get discouraged and want to...
Kind of anomaly here. We've had a pretty good coaching program here for years. Our head coach, guy in charge of the program, has been Monty Vaughn for years. Monty's a very good set of eyes, a very knowledgeable coach. He's coached the Ball State Lady Cardinals for years. He'll take ragtags each year and make them pretty decent bowlers. So we've had the option of several pretty good coaches out here to work with people that seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
But your lower average bowlers, they're of the mindset, oh, it's just bowling. I don't need coached. Where if they're starting out in golf, they're going to spend big bucks just to get some golf lessons.
One last question. When you go out and you watch people bowl, if you sell them a ball and you drill it for them, and oftentimes people will say, this ball doesn't fit. My fingers, my thumb, it doesn't feel right, because they're so used to bowling with something that doesn't feel right. How do you convince them to say, hey, your thumb is drilled correct, your span is drilled correct? Or better yet, coaches that bring kids in or people they're coaching and say, hey, here's a ball, it almost fits them. Please change the grips in the thumb, and then that's it. And you know that a ball, the VAL, the PAP, everything is all wrong on it. I mean, I personally have always said, if it's my work, I'm going to do it right. Do you ever find that you run into coaches who are overzealous in a way, that want something done the wrong way, which is only going to hurt them in the long run?
That's a lot with some of the coaches, and that's a lot with regular customers. So-and-so gave me a ball. I want you to plug it up, make the thumb fit me. I want you to change the finger inserts. We do a grip and hand analysis before we start working on something. And if the grip is going to wind up not close, then it's going to get a full plug, it's going to get a full slug. Something's being done to it to make it fit them. We'll explain the layout. This weight block is not in a place for how you roll the ball. The mass bias is not positioned to benefit you or help you the way it can. I leave it up to them.
And with coaches, they seem to, I've noticed over the years, your good coaches are great, but the coaches that are out there now, it seems like they take their online course and suddenly they are experts, and you got to kind of be the bad guy at times to say, hey, look, this isn't how this is done. You were one of the first people to institute a demo program years and years ago when nobody else was doing it. You had a whole wall just full of demos. You'd have people go out and throw them, never buy a ball or buy the ball, but you'd have people throw them, put games on them. Was it worth it? Is it worth it? Do you find people that say, oh, this ball fits? In reality, it's a demo fit, you know?
It's a demo fit, or it's a heck of a lot better fit than what they brought into me.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. For years and years, the comps I get, the seeds I get, those get Joe Average span put in them. The layout is for Joe Average PAP. It gives the customer something to take out and roll, see how the ball's going to react for them before they buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And it drives a lot of sales. My top 3 selling products are courtesy of seed balls.
So it's been a good deal for you.
It has been.
Now, are those seed balls that came from Ipsia? Are those something that were part of your program for Ipsia? Because Ipsia claims to always give you those seed balls at the seed ball price, you know, or is it more of a, you've been in the business long enough that they know that you're a mover and a shaker? And I think that's
I've been around long enough. They know I'm going to sell product for them. I've had a couple manufacturers that gave me some seed balls for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm.
That source dried up, and when I questioned them about it, it was, well, if you want a demo ball for your customer to try out, I suggest you buy one. Mm-hmm. You will not find those products in here.
Mm-hmm.
There's manufacturers that give me stuff for people to try out, and that's the products that sell in here.
And see, that's kind of where I was at. I used to get a lot of seed balls. Everybody wanted us to carry certain seed balls because they knew we could move the product. Whereas now it seems as though nobody, you know, they want to give you a keychain, but that's not going to move the product.
No.
And it's almost as if they focus on these much larger shops, but not realizing that if you look around this area, there's not a ton of other places to go. If someone wants bowling equipment, unless they're planning on buying it online, which I don't know about you, but for me has been a great success. You buy it online, I'll happily charge a drilling fee.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I may come out even ahead, you know. So I wanted to check in with you, Mike Riggins, you know, I saw you were on the cover of Bowling Center or Bowling Pro Shop Operator for the add-on sale. Still hanging in my pro shop. You know, always remembering to add on different products and things of that nature that have margin. And I always think we all tend to focus more on the bowling balls that may not have the better margin than the labor, the sides, and things of that nature.
And the little woofy wowzers, what I call accessories.
Accessories.
That's the suggestive sell.
Grips, slugs,
Cleaner,
interchangeables,
towel.
cleaners.
Yep.
And do you use any particular cleaner, any particular towel, any particular products, or is it just whatever is, you know, on sale that can be the best product for the money?
I don't look at sale prices when it comes to cleaners. Over the years, I've helped one of your former employers. When Bill Martin had Ultimate Products, I tested a lot of Bill's cleaners, polishes.
Black Magic was a very good polish.
Yep.
Still
and,
is.
There's some products out there that I've had the chance to test and work with. I've got some samples. They turned out to be really good products, easy for the consumer to use by hand. You don't have to have a spinner to do a good job of cleaning. And that's primarily the stuff I stock and the stuff I sell.
I would argue that the cleaner samples have better margins, so that the manufacturer reps or the ones that are left would rather bring those in than a bowling ball to test or whatever, because of the simple margins that they have. Everyone's got margin there.
My bone of contention on the bowling balls, I've always been able to sell bowling balls. I've always had good sales in bowling balls. The seed balls drive sales, and when I talk to manufacturers that don't want to give up seed balls, they'll say, well, I've only got a limited number for my territory. What kind of upsets me is they have amateur staff players that can't spell bowling, let alone make the product look good, that's never going to sell a bowling ball for them, where if the ball was in here on the wall and somebody could take it out and throw it, the odds of selling a ball for that company go up tremendously.
I would agree. You know, when I was with Motive, Brett, you know, and Scott were great people, and they signed me with Motive. And when I was bowling, I used every ball there was and had a pro shop. And while in my pro shop, yes, it did sell, but when I would bowl out here, not one single person ever bothered to look and say, what ball are you throwing? And I want to buy it. I am convinced that unless you bowl on TV, and even after seeing my TV numbers at Ultimate, it does not necessarily mean that these guys are selling bowling balls. And I often see amateur staffers who think that they're selling bowling balls, when in reality they are not selling anything. They talk a big game, they get their free stuff. But I've always said, these amateur staffers, if they were your customers, they were your serious customers who would buy 5 or 6 balls a year, that has now been taken away from you in those sales because they're now staffers.
And I don't have the opportunity to use that seed ball to help more of the product for that manufacturer.
Exactly. It's almost like it's like they're taking your biggest customer. Now you're relying on that middle customer, which is the league bowler. And if league numbers continue to decrease, then what customer is left? But the recreational customer who no longer buys stuff because the prices are too high. So you're basically got a shrinking market. You're fighting a two-front war. And we saw how well that worked out for Hitler. It's not exactly an easy thing to do.
Yep.
So the pro shop business seems like it can be very difficult, but the labor is always there, at least for now. And
the pro shop is all about service. The pro shop is service. You can go online and buy any product I have. Can you get it taken care of properly? Can you get the service that you deserve with it? Can you get the service that I can provide online? No, you can't.
Well, the customer that was just in here, we just spoke to him. He was talking about how to get his ball down lane further without necessarily polishing it. Had no idea about surface management.
Yep.
That's a service you can't get online, and even if you read it online, you may not know anything about it. So I would agree, and I think you would as well, that there's a service and a knowledge. And if we could just get people to pay for that knowledge, I don't think people understand how much, bowlers in particular, how much time you've spent adapting and learning this knowledge. You know, how many years did you teach at IPSIA?
I was a master instructor from 95 up until probably mid-2000s, late 2000s. I've taught pro shop classes for classic products for 23 years now.
So a master instructor. And now you're not even, I would assume you're not considered part of the master class now, because you haven't taken the new master class ran by people who haven't been in the business for a tenth as long as you have.
Yep, I've not fed the cash cow, so I imagine I've kind of fallen out of favor.
Well, join the club. I have not fed the cash cow either. You know, this is the Real Ballz podcast. I'm getting the real truth. But this is Mike Riggins, formerly of the Bowler Shop. Now it's Savage Bowling Anderson. And, you know, you should check it out. Awesome deals. And we'll have the next one coming from Fisher's a little bit later. But I appreciate your time, Mike, and your insight. Always the best. And Mike's got plenty of balls to drill because he's extremely popular. Got customers from all over. So say thank you and have a good one, Mike.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hey, bye.
My name's John Squires. I'm one of the partners of Strikes 300 Pro Shops in Noblesville, Indiana and Fishers, Indiana.
So, John, how do you determine what it is that you're going to stock in a pro shop? All these years of having merchandise, it's pretty clear that we can see that you've got a lot of cleaners and polishes. You got the chamois, you got the bowling balls, the bags, you even got wrist supports over here, as well as cleaners and accessories. How do you determine? There's a lot of what some would say is a bunch of shit in here. How do you determine what it is that you're going to carry and what it is that you want on your shelf? That, I mean, everything that's on the shelf ties up dollars. How do you determine that?
Well, first thing you have to remember is just because you don't like it doesn't mean a customer won't like it. So you have to have variety. And it goes with the wrist supports, it goes with the cleaners, it goes with all your towels, everything. And you do it by price, you do it by color, and you do it by popularity.
Do you fall into the same trap that most people do when, I was just speaking about this in my last podcast, where they may see an item such as the Rhino that's right behind you and they say, well, it's buy 4, get $10 off. And so they know one person who wants a Rhino, so they buy 4 of them. It turns out to be a big piece of shit like the Striking Motion, and now they've got 3 pieces of shit sitting around for 1 to sell. How, you know, just to save $10, but by the time they mark it down, it's not really much of a deal. How do you determine? I mean, it's got to be a guessing game. Do you try to pre-sell? Do you just, is it just based on gut, demand? How do you figure what's just leftover filler material to get through and what's going to be the real stickler?
Well, when you have deals that you are offered from the manufacturer, a lot of times maybe you have a couple pre-sales that you know you have, and that way if it's buy 4 at a time, then you at least maybe a couple of them are sold. If you're fortunate enough to have more than one shop, maybe you could put 1 in one shop, 1 in the other. If it's a popular item, then it's not a hard sell. But oftentimes some of those deals aren't really deals.
And I explained that in my in my podcast that I filmed over at Pinheads, was that if it wasn't for Pinheads, it's almost like Pinheads was a warehouse for this facility, and it allowed you to purchase and move product without having to buy massive quantities. But from what I remember being in the pro shop is that we used to go purchase large quantities of product at trade shows. It was regularly common. But now it's almost as if they're not even worth it.
Well, in a lot of cases that's true, because some of the deals aren't really deals. And with the turnover of bowling balls, especially in the high end, those deals, they don't make sense anymore to purchase those, because you're tying up too many dollars on an item that may or may not be around in 6 months, may or may not be a good piece of equipment. So in this day and age, tying up those kind of inventory dollars doesn't make a lot of sense.
Have you noticed over time that what used to just be a regular towel, they give it a new name, they call it a chamois or something of that nature, and the price suddenly, you know, triples, and it still does and serves the same purpose? Have you noticed that the pricing on some of these items, although reinvented, are a lot of the things that we always had before, and one of which I noticed with the T.B.B.N now outlawing wrist guards. Wrist guards just seem to be a thing of the past. You know, gloves in particular. People wearing gloves. I mean, unless it's Pete Weber with his golf glove, I just look at these wrist guards, and unless they're that top shelf Robo Arm style, the Robbies and whatnot just seem like they're a thing of the past. Is that true, or is that?
Well, we try to educate the consumer to understand that a wrist support has a function, and it's not to make the ball hook. Many consumers think that that's what they do, when the reality is it's just exactly what its name is. It's a wrist support. So if a bowler cannot keep the wrist straight through the follow-through, then they need a wrist support. But if you can do that, a wrist support is not necessary.
Did you ever find it odd that on the wrist supports they had the metal sticking right up into the palm, so that when you had to drill the ball, oftentimes it didn't even fit because it was pushing away from the ball?
We need to have the customer inform us ahead of time if they're using a wrist support, especially with these large wrist supports, that if without that, then the ball won't fit.
Do you honestly believe, and many do, I'm actually one of them, that those wrist supports, the larger ones, give you a distinct advantage when you're competing? I know the women wear them a lot of our staffers wear them, but I honestly believe that those wrist supports give a distinct advantage because they allow you a consistent wrist release every time.
Well, it eliminates one thing that you have to think about. It's like your shoes. You don't worry about your shoes. You don't need to worry about your wrist, because it's always going to be there, because that wrist support is going to make sure your shot is repeated every time.
I would argue that that's one of the most important things that it eliminates. You know, when you get to the line, if you just let off just a little bit on your wrist release, or you go a little too hard, you know, it eliminates two of the most important factors right there that can cause inconsistencies. Give you a break. So moving forward, one of the things I think we've really learned on this video is we've gotten to talk to an expert in the bowling industry, someone who's spent over 30-some years in the business. Myself, I've spent over 20-something. I was in the pro shop business. I've been in the bowling center business. I've been in the executive side of manufacturing. And one thing I've learned over time is that pro shops that are successful are the ones that treat it like it's a real business and not a hobby. If you look at the tools that we just introduced back there, those are very expensive tools. Those resurfacing machines are $3,000. Those drill presses are $10,000. Those other tools, a scale alone is $1,000. So what I would definitely say is that no matter what it is that you're doing, whether you are just starting out as a pro shop operator, know your markets, know your customer base, and more than that, make sure that when you are talking to a customer, you are treating them with respect, because you are the expert, they are not. And if you're a bowler who's interested in learning, talk to a pro shop operator. Don't rely on the negative sources and those that are going to try to make you what they want you to be. Oftentimes, they're snakes in the grass. A pro shop operator, while some of them may have brand allegiances, the most important thing is to talk to somebody who has the knowledge of how to develop and do what it is that you're wanting to do and help you move forward. So I hope you learned something today. I hope you had a great trip like I did, checking all this stuff out. And I hope to have a couple more interviews coming up. And I appreciate everybody's time. I will be back Monday, Wednesday, and Friday next week. If I'm not, I will make an adjustment, and it may be Tuesday, whatever it is. I've got interviews set up, so I want to make sure that everybody joins me at 5. But let's plan on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Real Ballz Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Squires. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and stay safe, everybody. Thank you, and have a great day.